Hello, and welcome to this evening's live webinar. My name is Derek McCormick. My day job is that I'm the director of Raising Children Network, and tonight I'm your host or facilitator for this live webinar conversation about baby sleep and settling 4 to 12 months. Some of you might have attended a recent webinar where we covered the same topic, but for the earlier months. And now we're moving into that rest of that first year with our expert on the line. So you're very welcome, and I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I work and live on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. And we have, of course, people joining us from many lands across this continent, many countries that exist inside what we call Australia. And I'd like to pay respects to elders past and present, and to pay respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community members who are joining us tonight. So, this webinar, if you haven't attended one of these before, the important thing to know is that it is live and will also be recorded and provided to all those who registered afterwards. But also, while we are live, it is interactive. So you can use the discussion area on the right-hand side of your screen to interact with each other, ask questions, and the good news is we have the amazing Susan and Anne in our chat room this evening to respond to you, not with questions that you have for our expert, but to respond to you with any other queries or support you might need. Something's not working, or you have a quick question for our team. So Anne and Susan are there to interact with you. And also, we will want to treat this as a conversation between myself and our expert, and then hear questions from you. And I will be seeing those come through, and we will get to those questions as soon as we can. We call these webinars Q&A style. It's really going to be a chat between myself and our expert guest, and then we move as quickly as we can into a chat that you have fueled with your questions. So have them ready. We also, of course, got a lot of questions submitted to us during registration, so they've really helped us focus in on what topics are most interesting to you. These webinars have been running for a number of years now, and it's thanks to some key organizations. The Department of Families, Fairness and Housing in Victoria has funded. So these could be free events. And they're brought to you by the Parenting Research Centre, where I work, and the Raising Children Network platform, which I also work on. So they're essentially the same organization doing different things at different times. Now, while we're discussing sometimes difficult topics like, challenges with sleep, it can bring up some feelings of stress or negative feelings you might be going through. If you do need more support while we're having a conversation tonight or after this, do remember there are places to go for extra help. Besides the online information, and we do have quite a lot of it on raisingchildren.net.au. Besides that, there is, of course, parent lines in different states. Lifeline is there for when you need an extra piece of help, and the Australian government website helps point you in the right direction for further support. So this webinar is for parents, carers, professionals, anybody who's connected with the job of raising young children. We're focusing on 4 to 12 months, but I think it's relevant for anyone who has an interest in healthy development of young children, and in particular sleep. So parents are who we reach out to, but we know we've got a lot of professionals on the line and those who work with family, support families. And of course, when we say carers, we mean moms, dads, grandparents, kinship carers, extended family. Now, we have a poll that is helping us understand what's going on for you. And what we thought we'd do is we'd take a moment to show you that poll, and you can tell us what brings you into the room tonight. What are you most interested in learning about? Settling to sleep, for example, or nighttime waking. You're interested in day naps, sleeping away from home, or other topics. So let's just take a moment to get that poll answered, and we can see what we get in the findings. So I'm going to pause now for a few seconds. All over it, jumping in real quick. So we have some interesting findings. I'm sharing these results now. So you should be seeing these on the screen. 29% settling to sleep is the concern or area of interest. 29% again, nighttime waking. So split down the middle, 27% day naps. So pretty right on track with those first three topics that we are planning to cover. 11% sleeping away from home and then 4% other. So that's what we have as sort of the key interest areas. Okay, I'll end that poll now and we can carry on. And now I don't have to carry on alone because I can interview and interview and also welcome into the conversation Fallon Cook. Dr. Fallon Cook is our expert tonight. Dr. Fallon is a co-director and pediatric sleep practitioner with Infant Sleep Australia and Children's Sleep Australia. Fallon is an author, has worked in this area for many years, and is an instructor on pediatric sleep programs of a number of kinds. So we have a lot of expertise in the head of Fallon to pick apart now, and we can do that first with a conversation between myself and Fallon, and then we'll be getting to your questions. I will mention here at this point, as we get through this, and then to the end of our 1 hour, won't go over an hour. We're aiming for an hour tops. You do have the chance to offer us feedback through a very short survey at the end. So you look out for that. So Fallon, welcome, and it's great to chat with you again.
Yeah, you too, Derek. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I really enjoy these conversations and then really enjoy see what we get from parents and how we can address those questions.
Mm.
So to get ourselves warmed up, I'm going to kick off with a broad question and then you can speak to that and we'll roll on from there. So here's my starter, Fallon. When it comes to sleep, and we are looking at that second half of the first year, 4 months to 12, in those months, perhaps different to the earlier months, how much sleep is typical for babies in that age bracket?
Mm. It's a really commonly asked question. And it's a great question because there is such a huge degree of variability, both across time from 4 to 12 months, but also within babies as well. So from baby to baby, we see quite a big difference in how much sleep they would typically have. And we actually have a really great graph for this one, Derek. It might be the next slide along. But what we can see is that, and you can see that's the second bottom row there. It shows the sleep duration averages for infants 4 to 11 months. And you can see that there's a huge range of typical. So babies of this age could have anywhere from 10 hours of sleep per 24 hours right through to 18 hours of sleep per 24 hours. So it really is a huge range. And of course, that changes across that first year, with most babies sort of gradually having a decline in how much sleep they need. So when you look at a graph like this, I think it's really important to remember that it's so important not to compare your baby to other babies, especially if you're attending things like parent groups. You might sort of be surrounded by babies that sleep very differently to your own baby. So yeah, try not to make those sort of comparisons because
Mm.
there'll be some babies that can have huge long day naps and still do really well overnight. Others that just have really short naps and they're still happy, they're still really healthy. So yeah, you can usually babies are very good at making sure they get the amount of sleep that they uniquely need. And I'd just be looking for those signs of, are they having some happy awake time between their naps? They're probably getting enough sleep. But if they're grumpy all of the time, then, they might not be getting quite enough sleep. But that's actually pretty rare. Babies are typically pretty good at meeting their unique sleep needs. We often
Mm.
say to parents, if you're wondering what your baby's sort of unique sleep needs are, you could use a sleep diary. We have them for free on our website. There's lots of tracking apps as well. And if you have a bit of a look at how much sleep your baby's averaging across a week, it's going to give you a bit of an idea of what you can expect with your baby's sleep. If they're sort of averaging 12 hours or 14 hours, you can start to kind of think about, well, how much sleep will they have during the day versus their night? You can get a bit of a sense of what you might expect for your unique little baby.
Mm. That's quite a variety, quite a spread. And so the message is while you're, looking at tracking or being conscious of your baby's patterns, don't compare because there really is a lot of a lot of diverse patterns that between children. So don't compare, don't get wrapped up in that.
Yeah, that's right. There's huge variability baby to baby, and it's easy to panic as a parent, isn't it? Thinking, oh, my baby doesn't do what this other baby does, but they're probably doing what they need, and that's
Mm.
the important thing.
Yeah. I still remember when my children were younger, the whole percentile conversations, and I never really enjoyed them. Um, let's talk about something a little different, but still related to, this broad stroke. The question here is well, should babies be on a set schedule each day? We often hear a lot about routines and how routines generally are a good thing, can be a good thing. But what about sleep and a schedule of sleep each day? What do you say to that, Val?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of advice and sort of noise online in particular about these sort of rigid age-based schedules. So for a lot of parents, they've probably already seen many sort of varieties of this online where the advice is, well, if your baby is this age, then they must sleep this certain amount, or they must be awake for this certain amount of time. They can be very, very rigid, but they're not actually grounded in any evidence. And when we look at those rigid age-based schedules, they really don't allow for that natural variability in sleep needs that babies have. So definitely it's better to just look at how much sleep your baby's averaging across a 24-hour period, to get a bit of a sense of, what their unique sleep needs are, rather than being too focused on being really rigid. Because given the variability in sleep needs, for any at any particular age, if we try to follow a sort of rigid age-based schedule, there'll be a few that it works for because they actually do have sleep needs that kind of fit within that schedule. But there are huge numbers of babies that won't fit into that schedule. And that's when parents can feel really disheartened and like, oh, I'm doing something wrong. I'm not managing to get my baby to fit this schedule, when actually there's nothing wrong. It's the
Mm,
schedule that's the problem, not the baby.
one size does not fit all.
Exactly.
Excellent. It's quite reassuring, really. I wish I'd known earlier. Um, Tell me more about, you mentioned day napping, and it was one of the top, well, it was kind of split down the middle with the other topics that people were interested in hearing about, and that is day napping. So tell me a bit more about what to expect around day napping during this age bracket, in that 4 to 12 months.
Yeah, so at 4 months of age, most babies are having usually 3 or 4 naps, sometimes 5 naps. That tends to reduce across that first year. So around 6 to 7 months of age, most babies are starting to drop down to just 2 naps per day. And then from sort of 12 to 15 months, as they enter toddlerhood, they'll often just drop down to 1 day nap at that point. But again, that's just a rough guide. So it's really important that rather than just saying, okay, there's 6 months, we're dropping to 2 naps today, you're much better off just kind of following your baby's lead and looking for signs that they are ready to drop a nap. So often you'll notice that the last nap of the day is a really hard one to do. They might be really pushing back against it, or maybe the nap's okay, but then at bedtime you're really feeling that something's a bit off. They're not wanting to go to sleep. So you'll notice those signs, and that's what I would be led by in terms of when to drop naps. The other thing I'd suggest too is if you are, finding that nights are really tricky. So if you've got a lot of night waking, things just aren't really coming together at night time. And you notice that, well, a lot of babies are starting to drop that last nap, at about this time. That's usually a pretty good cue to have a go at dropping that day nap. Often, you drop that nap, the nights improve. They wake up a bit happier the next day. They power through the day on less days sleep. Okay, so yeah, keep that in mind when it comes to those average ages at when they drop a nap. It is just an average, but if you're having tricky nights, you're probably getting close to that point where they're ready to drop a nap.
Mm, okay, and of course, we always say parents are experts in their children more than anyone else because they know the signs more than other people because they're in that experience every day. So that's good advice. And when it comes to settling itself, a lot of parents would be here today or tonight because they're having a tough time settling. And this is the parents who will be coming to you as well. So they're having real difficulty getting the babies to sleep, or when they wake at night, it's causing, a lot of difficulty or stress. So I thought it'd be good to ask you, what, given just the number of families you've been seeing over the years, what are you seeing in your clinic?
Yeah, well, we see it all. We see everything from really minor little sleep challenges, and there's a bit of a tweak here and there to make, through to really, really severe and persistent sleep difficulties. What I would say is, like, mostly we start to see families when their babies are around 4 to 6 months of age. This is an age where a lot of babies start to develop really strong preferences. So they've got opinions on where they should fall asleep and how they should fall asleep. So often parents will say, oh, sleep was okay for the first few months, but then around 4 or 5 months, it really started to become a bit more challenging. So yeah, we've definitely, had families say, I can only get my baby to sleep if I drive them in the car every night. We've got parents driving around at 3 o'clock in the morning trying to get their babies back to sleep. We see parents who have to bounce their baby on a fit ball for hours on end. And of course, lots of rocking to sleep, lots of feeding to sleep as well. And these are the sorts of things that parents are often looking for help with. And the challenging thing with this is when babies do need a lot of support to fall asleep. So it's not just a case of putting them down and saying goodnight. They're wanting a lot of hands-on support. Usually it's the case that their nights start to become really fragmented, and parents will say, they're waking constantly wanting this same support to get back to sleep. And often parents are also saying, the minute I try to put my sleeping baby into the cot, their eyes just ping open, they're wide
Mhm.
awake. And it can be incredibly fatiguing for parents. Um, so yeah, generally we see a lot of families who are, recognize that the way their baby's falling asleep is starting to not work for them so much anymore, and they're really wanting to change their settling approach. And I would just say finally that we see a lot of parents who feel very, very stuck and quite helpless.
Mhm.
I think a lot of parents worry about sleep. They feel like, they that nothing could be done until, their baby just grows out of whatever it is that they're wanting to settle to sleep. But what we know in the data is that when there is a sleep difficulty that's persisted for, a few weeks or so, often they don't just grow out of it, can hang around for quite a long time. So we're always saying to parents, don't feel stuck. There are loads of strategies and things that can be done to really improve sleep. Sometimes sleep difficulties are, quite horrendous. So it can be really, really challenging for families. But don't feel stuck, because there are so many very gentle, very responsive, and safe approaches that can be used that are not only going to improve your little one's sleep, but they're going to drastically improve your sleep as a parent. And often that has huge flow-on effects for, the well-being of the whole family unit. So
Mhm.
if you are
Yeah.
tuning in and feeling a bit stuck, just know that there are plenty of pathways forward from here.
Gentle and responsive and safe approaches. And just before we get onto like how this works out for families, is it also true to say, Fallon, that sometimes you might have tried something and it hasn't worked at that time, but it may work at another time? So the approach might uh, different things will work at different times?
Yeah, it's definitely true. Yeah, look, sometimes families will say, I tried this, but sometimes it's a case of it's not the right time for the parent either. I think
Mm,
that's really important, that sometimes we think, oh, we've got to work on this, we've got to change something. So and so said I need to do this differently. And we go to try and do it, and yeah, it doesn't work out. I think I'm a big believer that there's a right time for everything. And so sometimes we just have to wait. And when we're feeling ready, then we try again, or maybe it is a case of trying something new.
yeah, so it's just nice to have in your back pocket some info or guidance on these safe and supported approaches that are responsive and can be used at different times in different ways. So how do parents generally get going? How do they start with using these strategies?
Yeah, so look, often we would encourage families to start to think about sleep associations. So a lot of parents would have already heard of these, but they tend to start to develop at 4 months of age. And often they're really closely tied into sleep difficulties. In fact, we've got research from tens of thousands of families and babies showing that sleep associations are a really important ingredient of sort of overall sleep health. So a sleep association is just something that we need to fall asleep as a human. We can even think about our own sleep associations as adults. Majority of adults need to have a pillow under their head and a blanket on them to fall asleep. And if you wake up in the night and maybe the blanket and the pillow fell off the bed, well, you don't just drift back off to sleep again. You'll wake right up. You'll want those things back again, and you probably won't go to sleep until you've, reset those things around you. So, what I want parents to know is that at about that 4 or 5 month mark of age, your baby's developing those same sort of preferences. And what sort of underpins that is that babies are starting to do what we call the systems check. So we all do it at night time. And I think everyone tuning in can probably think of an example of this in themselves. When we sort of fall asleep, we go into the deeper stages of sleep and then we cycle up into the lighter stages. And when we're in light sleep, our brain just does this little quick check of the environment. Has anything changed? Am I too hot, too cold, hungry, in pain? We're checking all of those things. And if everything's kind of pretty much the same and it's all good, we'll just go back asleep. But we might not even remember having roused at all. But if anything's changed, our brain sort of sends an alert, wake up, you need to check, what's going on. So that's what's happening for babies. So think about the things that your baby might be relying on to fall asleep. And are those things still present when they wake up in the night? So I think one of the more common ones is often parents of older babies will say, yeah, I rock them to sleep or feed them to sleep. And then I hear them, they come up into light sleep, they spring awake and they're furiously mad because they're like, how did I get in my cot? This is not where I was when I fell asleep and I, want to be back in your arms again. So that's definitely something to think about. And also keep in mind that it is entirely your choice, when, if, how you change how they fall asleep. So there will be a few babies out there. They're not super common, but there are some babies that don't care where they fall asleep. They'll still do really well. But for a lot of parents, their babies aren't like that. And it gets to a point where parent fatigue can be very high. You might be woken up 8 or 10 times per night. And if that's becoming a problem for you, then yeah, this is something that you might like to have a little think about.
Excellent. I'm just taking a quick pause because I'm moving pretty fast, Fallon, and I want you to keep your breath and not spit yourself through. We're going to move on to, let's say, two or maybe three more questions from me that are kind of distilled from everything we've been hearing from registrants, and then we'll jump into our Q&A with those who are here now. Right. So, do you have any advice for parents who that want their babies to fall asleep in their cot, but they don't know where to begin? So, where to start with that transition to cot?
Yeah, definitely. And I thought what I might do this evening is talk through a really, really lovely approach that I think lots of parents really enjoy because they can really tailor it to their kind of unique situation. And yeah, we'll sort of talk through 3 steps that you can take towards cot settling. That is a really, really supportive way to do it. So what we want to do is maybe we'll take an example of maybe you're rocking your baby to sleep. It's a pretty common one. So if you're rocking your baby to sleep, to suddenly put them down in their cot for sleep, they're not going to be happy about it. They're not going to be too thrilled. And so it can feel very, very different for a baby to be put down in their cot if they're only used to falling asleep in your arms. So as step one, what we often suggest is to introduce 3 new sleep associations that are sleep associations that can carry over to that cot environment. So often what we suggest is to introduce some patting. It could just be like a heartbeat rhythm pat or a steady pat. Start to shush and also have a dark room when you're settling them for sleep. So for this step one, you're still rocking them to sleep, but you're just adding in patting and shushing and the darkness at sleep time. So after about a week of doing that, for every single settle when your baby falls asleep, those things have become habits for them. They expect patting and shushing in a dark room at sleep time. So then when you're feeling ready, after you've done that bit of practice for a week or so, and you do move to step 2, which is where you would settle them in the cot, you're using that exact same padding and shushing. They've got the darkness as well. And you can give them full hands-on support, padding and shushing them all the way to sleep. So it's a lovely process where we're just trying to smooth that transition for the baby so it's not such an unexpected change for them. And even when you do this, if maybe you think, okay, I've been padding and shushing for 5 minutes, or maybe it's been 10 minutes. If you think you're not getting anywhere, pick them up, have a cuddle, do a bit of a reset. When they're calm again, you can pop them back down and keep going with your padding and shushing until they sleep. So you're giving them, a ton of support. It really is a lovely process. And often parents will say that maybe 2 or 3 settles in, their baby seems to have adjusted. They can put them down now, they start padding and shushing, and they're very quick to fall asleep. And that's when parents can, at that point or whenever they're ready, move to step 3, which is when we say, you can start to phase out the padding and the humming on a time course that works for you. So there will certainly be parents who say, oh, once they were, used to being in their cot, they didn't need me there. They didn't want me there. I could just wander away and they were totally fine. Other parents have very sensitive babies where they'll do a very gradual reduction in padding and shushing. They might pat 10 times, take the hand away for 10 seconds, just gradually reducing the padding. And then when they're just shushing their baby to sleep, they can start to even just wander away. So the shushing gets a little bit quieter, wander back in again. And really, once your baby's at that point where they're not needing padding or shushing to fall asleep, generally there is a very big reduction in nighttime waking because they go to do that systems check. They come up into light sleep, they do the systems check and go, yep, I fell asleep here, nothing's changed, everything's okay. And provided they're not hungry or thirsty or in pain, they'll
Mm.
just drift back off to sleep again. And that's probably the holy grail for a lot of parents. That's what they're often hoping for. So yeah, it's a great process that parents can think about how they might sort of fit those steps to their own little ones.
And very, very easy to follow. 3 steps. And of course, it might work differently for different people, but that order makes a lot of sense. Excellent. So we've touched on some of the big things like associations and that nice idea of the systems check. Babies are doing that like we do it so that we feel this is the right environment for me to sleep in. But what else might be the reason? Some stuff we haven't said yet, that might be the reason baby's unsettled around sleep time.
Yeah, so there are certainly plenty of babies that do get, upset around sleep time. They maybe just, I often joke they have a bit of fear of missing out. They're FOMO babies and they're
Mhm.
not wanting to go to sleep. They've got things I'd rather do. So always we want to check that they are truly ready and tired for sleep. So if there is a nap that's getting very, very close to bedtime, it might be that you either push bedtime a bit later or it might be time to drop that nap. That's a really common reason for really unsettled behavior at bedtime. But look, babies can cry for lots of reasons. We've got a slide here, I think, Derek, showing a really great resource that I love to give parents. It's, yeah, the Soothing a Crying Baby in Pictures. It's a great resource just to print off. I always tell parents, pop it on your fridge. And if you're, having one of these episodes with your baby where they're really upset and crying a lot, it just gives you a lovely checklist to work through so you can check off the major things that you might not have thought of, that could be bothering your baby. So definitely check that resource out. And there's a couple of other things I think are really important. So one is just making sure you've got a consistent bedtime wind down routine. And I think parents hear this all the time, but it's actually really, really good advice. We see it in the research when babies, toddlers, well, even adults as well, when we have a predictable kind of series of things that happen in the lead up to bedtime, our brains detect, okay, sleep's definitely coming, so I need to be ready for sleep. So for even babies, it can really help to have a predictable pattern to what you do in the lead up to bed. So it might be that you put on their pajamas or their sleep suit. They might have that final feed of the day. Maybe there's a story or a song, some cuddles. You can decide what that routine looks like, but just aim to keep it fairly predictable each evening. You can even do a shortened version of that for nap time as well to help prepare them for sleep. And just finally, on the sort of unsettled behavior around sleep time, there's a few key factors I really like parents to be aware of. So, there are, physiological factors that can really impact sleep. And if you notice any of these signs, you definitely want to have a chat with your GP because it could be that unsettled behavior or sleep disruptions, have a cause that can be treated. So that's things like eczema. Even really mild eczema or dry, rough skin can have a really big impact on sleep quality. Vomiting, so we're not talking about just little possets, which are quite normal, but vomiting large quantities, an excessive amount is a sign something's up. And then thinking about your baby's nappies, if you're seeing a lot of mucus, blood, runny poos, it's a sign that their gut might be a little bit irritated. So definitely see your GP about that. And just finally, in babies or children of any age, snoring, mouth breathing, or just noisy breathing during sleep, it's never normal for a baby. So if you notice any of those signs, please go and have a chat with your family doctor and get things checked out. Because it might be that sleep won't improve and that unsettled behavior might not resolve until we've got a handle on those difficulties.
I did not know that about noisy sleeping because when we get into our adult years, we start to accept that people,
Mm.
some are noisy sleepers, and maybe some babies are too. So that's a really important tip to jump on that if you need some extra help because it might be getting in the way of any other thing working.
Yeah, and babies can be noisy sleepers where they just make a lot of grumbling, grizzly noises. But we're talking about noisy breathing during sleep. So if it's always raspy or sounds a bit labored or noisy breathing, yeah, that's when you should get it checked out.
Okay, great. One last question to sort of help us move into our live questions, and that is with all these different strategies in place, it, the question really is, and sleep being such a big part of this part of life, where can parents get more help if they need it? So more help or more advice outside of, say, this session or trying out the strategies you recommend.
Yeah, so look, definitely if you've got any concerns about your baby, start with your GP or your maternal and child health nurse. They can check off, if there are any potential medical factors impacting sleep. And often they've got some great advice around sleep as well. And if you need a really high level of support, so if you're really struggling significantly with sleep or settling, your family doctor might refer you to an early parenting centre. A lot of parents call these sleep schools, but the idea is that you can go along, you can even stay there for a few nights and have hands-on support from nurses and doctors who can help you with the settling and the sleep side of things as well. So it's a very intense level of support, but they are, a really helpful resource for some families. But in between that, there's not every family needs that intense support from a sleep school. Sometimes we just need some practical strategies and some knowledge around normal sleep and, how to manage our own baby's sleep. In this case, I'd say there are some good resources online, but it's really murky. It's really hard to find the good sleep and settling advice online. It is a very, very contentious space. There's a lot of, really emotive advice
Mm.
that can make parents feel very confused and often worse off than before they started looking for help. So I would say you want to really look for evidence-based online programs or resources, looking for things like are they citing their research sources? Are the people who created the resources, do they have university degrees in a relevant area of study? How have they learnt about sleep? Do they know about the circadian rhythm? Do a bit of a check of those sorts of things. And I would say there's some really clear red flags out there at the moment. So if you hear some advice and you think, gosh, that sounds really strange or very different to what my doctor told me about or my health nurse told me about, that's probably a bit of a red flag to just be on the alert. Yeah, if you're hearing things that are also really emotional or you sort of have a fearful message behind it as well, I'd also, tread cautiously. But that space between sort of general advice and information and the really intense support of a sleep school, what we're trying to do at Infant Sleep Australia is to really bolster that middle ground where parents just need some practical advice that they can tailor to their own unique baby. And that's a space we're trying to fill with more of that good quality information to help drown out some of the misleading information that's out there. So That's
Mm.
what we do in our clinics and programs. But I would say as well, just think about the practical support around you too as a parent. So you might not need intense sleep support, but you might just need some practical and emotional support. And I say this to families in clinic every day. You're going to have all these people who say to you, friends and family who say, "Oh, let me know what I can do, happy to help." And they often have no idea what to do. They're so willing to help, but they just need to be given a job. So even start making a list today. What are some of the things that you would love to just take off your plate if you're battling with sleepless nights? Maybe it's picking up groceries, getting the toddler from daycare, bringing in the mail. And the next time someone says that, give them a job. Give them something to do to help you, because it is really important to accept those offers of help. And one last little sort of safety message, I think, to wrap up this question. And I think this is really important to think about. It's a bit more of a serious one. But as parents, it is so challenging when your sleep is so interrupted. You might be hearing a lot of crying from your baby. There are some very tough times in that first year. And a lot of parents report that they start to feel very angry and very frustrated towards their baby. If you are feeling like that at any point, I always want parents to know that it is absolutely okay to put your baby down in a safe place like their cot and just walk away and have a breather, because we can't, from a place of anger and frustration, you're not going to be able to calm an unsettled baby. It's okay to put them down, step away, make a cuppa, call a friend, get some of those supports in place. But really focus on keeping your baby safe, and popping them in the cot is one of the safest places they can be if you are feeling really, really overwhelmed.
That's really great advice, Fallon, and I think it helps. I think it would help parents to think about the different kinds of support like as different. So informational support, like what you do at your clinic and what we're doing here this evening, great. But then emotional support, maybe that's what I need right now. I just need a sanity chat with somebody right now who I can reach out to right now. And then this separate, again, practical. I need somebody to do something for me, and I've got my little list of things that I could use help with in the daytime or the nighttime. So I think, yeah, those three categories are very helpful. Right, we are ready to jump into questions we've got from our participants. It's a healthy, buzzing chat room, and we've got a few to look at, and we've got a good chunk of time. So to begin with, I'm just going to jump around the questions we have, but I will start with a question from Laura, because Laura had a couple of questions flow through, and we'll get to as many of Laura's as we can, and then we'll jump around to others. But to start with, Laura's question was, how long is too long to keep baby awake between naps? So Laura's baby is 8 months old, and Laura's thinking mainly about the nap between the time between the last nap of the day and bedtime.
I love this question. It varies a lot, and especially that last sort of period of awake time before bed. It's often the longer stretch of awake time that a baby will have. So this will vary a lot baby to baby. So a baby with a really high need for sleep, maybe they're one of the 16-hour, sleepers, they might not manage very much awake time because they've got to get a lot of sleep kind of done. A baby with a really low sleep need who manages really well with a lot less sleep, and they're busy little babies, might manage a really long amount of time awake and be perfectly happy and healthy. So what I'd be thinking though, as a very rough guide, not knowing Laura's individual baby, is that at 8 months, I would expect they'd be awake, yeah, at least sort of 3.5 hours before bed. Yeah, just as a rough guide. And I'd
Mm.
also be thinking that, there's no firm, this amount of time is too long. I would be watching your baby, watching for a real collection of tired signs. So are they grizzly and grumpy? Nothing can really distract them from their grumpiness. They're just, often they're rubbing their faces into their parents and wanting to be held a lot. They're your key signs. And I just add to that as well, there's a lot of misinformation about overtiredness, but there's very little evidence that overtiredness has an impact on nighttime sleep, which I know a lot of parents will be going, "What? You're joking." It's all over the internet.
We did have a couple of questions in here about overtiredness. Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, yeah, look, it's certainly by 8 months of age. We really don't have to be so worried about overtiredness. If your baby's awake for a really, extra long amount of time, maybe there's a lot going on in your household, it doesn't mean they're going to have a terrible night. So try not to worry too much about that. We actually see the opposite with parents being so frightened of overtiredness that they settle their babies too quickly, and then they get really fragmented nights where the babies are waking up a lot because they've just been put down too early for sleep.
Mm, okay, great. Another question, which is sort of it's again in that what to expect category. Cindy asks, at what age should we expect our baby to start self-settling? So, for example, what does self-settling start to look like in a 5-month-old?
Yeah, yep. It's another really good question, and I love answering this question. It gets asked a lot because there are babies who, from a few days old, will self-settle themselves off to sleep. And I know that sounds really shocking. Majority of babies won't do that. They'll need a lot of support to fall asleep. But I think it's important to highlight again, massive variability baby to baby. So some babies are very happy to even when they're really little, they just really like their space and they can get themselves off to sleep, no problem, without, needing that hands-on support. But for others, it definitely takes time. So in a 5-month-old, yeah, certainly they can develop the skill to put themselves off to sleep without needing hands-on support. And you'll notice they'll start to show, as they learn this skill, they'll start to show self-soothing abilities. So they'll come up with their own little strategies and things they like to do to calm themselves down for sleep. So a lot of babies will suck their fingers or their thumb. A lot of them like to sort of rock their head side to side when they get in the cot, or they might make these sort of calming noises. They often sort of like to go, sort of make these funny drawn out sounds. Yeah, it's really amazing what babies do that they find, enjoyable and that helps them calm down for sleep. So, yeah, babies will start to develop those abilities really in their own time. Some of them really don't want to, and it takes them longer. Others will just pick it up really quickly, really early on.
Great. We're going to jump back to the topic of associations, sleep associations now. Kay says, "Hi everyone. My question is about sleep associations. When's the best time to wean our bubs off them? For example, weaning off dummies or weaning off white noise music, which I know you've recommended can help. Um, so what Kay is getting at, is there a time for this to sort of back off, or her child, for example, will wake up when the dummy falls out, and then that association is still there. What are your comments on that, Fallon?
Yeah, there's a lot to pick apart there. So something like white noise, there's no big hurry to wean that off. You can really just do it at any time. I would say use white noise until it's no longer needed. So if your baby is, very sensitive to environmental noises and wakes really easy, well, you might keep using that white noise, as long as you need it. With something like the dummy, it's a little bit more complicated because dummies they can be an incredible help, especially for parents who are parenting solo or don't have a partner. It can be a real lifesaver to have a dummy to help in those really tricky moments. So I'm somebody who doesn't have a blanket ban on dummies, not at all. I think there's a really important role for dummies. But I think it comes down to the individual baby and family. So if you have your baby having a dummy doesn't cause any sleep problems, so they're not dropping it all the time, and then maybe they have it to fall asleep and then they just sleep fine overnight without it. You've got no need to hurry to get rid of it. You can do it if and when you want to. Um, if they are, constantly waking themselves up, you can start to do a bit of dummy replacement practice. So in the daytime, when they're relaxed and happy, you can scatter some dummies around so they can practice trying to pick them up. You can even put a dummy in their hand and then show them how to get their hand up to their mouth. But it's usually not until about 7 or 8 months of age that babies learn how to replace the dummy on their own. So if you've got maybe a 5 or 6 month old, they're waking up a lot needing their dummy replaced and you're exhausted by it, you'd have to think, can we wait another couple of months of this exhaustion and then know that our baby can replace it themselves? Or do we just ditch the dummy now, weather a few tricky nights, give some extra support, and then the dummy's kind of gone. So not a straightforward answer, but hopefully that gives you some things to think about to work out if it is, the right decision to keep it for now or to ditch it.
Yeah, and it's not the same for every association or thing. Okay,
Mm.
very good. I like this question. I think we'll go to this. This is from Laura, and it relates to um, partners working together on settling. So I thought it'd be a good one to highlight. So let's just get back to it here. Yes. Laura says, my partner only sleeps in the same room as Bubba and I on weekends for work reasons. Should he be trying to settle the baby while he's around those nights for the 2 nights, or is it better to have one consistent person?
I would definitely share the settling. I think it can be such a slippery slope where often babies end up really demanding just one parent overnight. And if that's the balance we end up with and it lasts for months and months on end, then we end up with one parent who is, potentially very, very tired. And that's not, it's not a good balance in that kind of parenting relationship. So what I would be aiming to do is to have both parents present with the settling as often as possible or be switching parents as often as possible so that your baby kind of gets used to the fact that, okay, mum can settle me, but so can dad, or so can this other caregiver. It could be a grandparent or somebody else. We just want babies to know that, anybody is able to settle them. And you can talk to all the different caregivers your baby has about how you settle them so that you're all doing something fairly similar and predictable. And that's likely to help your baby settle better too. So I would say definitely try and share it where you can. It can just mean that in the long run, everybody plays an active role and your baby's always used to being settled by multiple people.
Nice. Okay, great. A short question here from Angela. Angela's wondering, is it okay to breastfeed my baby to sleep for the day naps? It's the only thing that seems to be working.
Absolutely. If you're happy with it and it's working well for you, there's no reason to stop. If Angela said that, oh, nights are really, really challenging, my baby seems to be waking a lot at night time, wanting to feed back to sleep, that only then would I say, well, maybe we need to start to bring in some other ways of falling asleep. So yeah, no, it's definitely not a blanket. No, it's a problem and it's got to stop. It just depends on, if it's working for you for now, keep doing it. But if you start to notice that other aspects of sleep are becoming really challenging, then it might be that your baby's suddenly waking up at night thinking, oh, sometimes I feed to sleep and it's so lovely and I'd love a bit of that right now. And yeah, you can make a decision then if it's no longer working.
Mm, great. On my way to the next question, I noticed that Maddie Kay says to us that she's trying to get her baby to sleep right now. Ha ha ha. That's kind of nice to know that we're actually in the moment. But if, of course, Maddie, if you need to focus on that, you can also watch the recording of this later on. We wouldn't want to pull focus from the main job.
Luck, Maddie.
Yeah, good luck. Absolutely. Christine asks the question, my 5-month-old wakes very frequently at night, around 6 to 8 times each night. What can we do to have longer stretches without these wakes?
Hmm. So, what I would be thinking about are two kind of key components. And this is what we go through in the clinic and our programs as well. So, the first thing at this age I'd be thinking about is the sort of timing side of things and that daily rhythm. So with such frequent night waking, and that's a bit more often, that frequency of night waking is a bit higher than what we would typically see at that age. With that amount of night waking, it always raises a question for me of does this daily rhythm fit this baby? So for sometimes they're just having too much day sleep, and by the time it gets to the night, there's just no what we call sort of sleep drive or sleep pressure. During the day, our drive to sleep kind of gradually builds up when we're awake, and if we have a nap, it comes back down again. So if a baby's having lots of naps, it might just constantly be coming back down all day long, or if they have a really long nap, it's really bringing the edge off that. So sometimes by nighttime, they just can't do big long stretches of sleep because they're just not really tired enough for it. So I'd be thinking about, if I was working with this family, would be looking at what that child's unique sleep needs are, working out a daily rhythm that's really fitted to what that child needs, so that we then know at night time we've got the best chance of them settling easily and having some longer stretches of sleep. And then once that's sort of worked out, we would always then be thinking about the settling side of things. So is the way they're falling asleep contributing to some of those night wakes? If they're, getting a lot of hands-on support to fall asleep, are they springing awake in the night quite cross to find that you're no longer there doing those things? And at 5 months of age, it is really common for them to start to suddenly have those strong preferences. So I'd be thinking about that. And if you think that's part of the equation, then that sort of three-step process I talked about earlier could be a really good place to start. Yeah, and if you're really stuck, reach out for support because, sometimes we agonize for months as parents trying all the things, but just having one clear approach and one plan in place just means it gets sorted out nice and quickly and you're off and away and start to enjoy parenting a bit more, feeling a bit more refreshed.
Mm, mm. Yeah, again, practical support, but also professional support is not just a good idea if you feel you need it. I think we should celebrate the fact that people can ask for that support when they do ask for it. And Tanya had, I think, a similar question. Tanya's child is 5.5 months, lots of waking every 2 hours, roughly. And assuming that it was hunger, Tanya would feed to sleep, and then but wondered, am doing the right thing in terms of like, is this genuine hunger, and the child needs a feed, or is it something else I should be thinking about these 2 hourly wake ups?
Yeah, I think Tanya's baby is right in that phase where it's really hard to untangle, what's genuine hunger and what is just a baby thinking, well, feeding to sleep's lovely, it's nice and comforting, and it's just, becoming part of their kind of set of preferences that they have. So with reducing night feeds, definitely have a chat with your maternal and child health nurse or your GP. Make sure that weight gain has been tracking along really nicely. I would say 2 hourly feeds at 5 months of age is pretty frequent. You probably could stretch it out to, 3 hours or so. Some people would say, stretch them through on just one feed overnight. But I think it's highly personal and every baby is different. We don't want to be weaning night feeds too quickly if they're not ready for it. So have a bit of a think about that, Tanya. It might be that you think, okay, tonight I'm going to try and wait until it's been maybe 3 hours and see how they go resettling with something other than the feed. But only if you're feeling ready for it. There's no big hurry. A lot of parents will wait until 6 months when their babies have started on solids, and then they'll start to reduce the night feeds. So if you're not feeling quite ready yet, it's perfectly fine to wait until you really are feeling ready for it. And yeah, you could check in with your health nurse or GP to make sure they're happy with you doing that as well.
Mm. And I think that advice probably goes well with Michaela's question as well. It's quite a similar question about feeding versus, what else for those night wake. Not as many wakes from Michaela. So I'll move on to a question from Sula. Can you remove the pacifier for night sleeps, but keep it in for day naps and car rides? So this is about situational napping. And we did have another question while I'm mentioning it, where the question was, if I'm doing naps in the car or pram or outside the house, is that okay in terms of getting the naps in, or should I really be thinking about naps at home? So two-parter. Does it matter?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So that first part with the dummy, I would say with the dummy, go all in or all out. So babies typically don't do well if sometimes they can have it and other times they can't because they just don't understand, why or when. So I haven't really heard of that ever working very well to have it just in the daytime and not at nighttime. I would say make a call on they either have it when, whenever they fall asleep or they just don't have it at all. And then in terms of having naps on the go in the pram or the car, 100% do it. It is, I say this to all parents, do naps on the go because you've got to get out of the house. It's good for your mental health. It's a great experience for your baby, having all of this interaction and new stimulation, seeing new things. And for a lot of families, naps on the go in the pram or the car, just as an aside, if you have been having trouble getting them, falling asleep in their cot, Well, the car or the pram, it's a really lovely halfway point, I suppose, between falling asleep in your arms and falling asleep in the cot. It's maybe a little bit more independent, but there's still some movement that they like and find soothing. So it can be that doing some naps on the go is just a really nice way to kind of bridge that transition to some of the cot or bassinet settles at home. And of course, keep in mind the SIDS guidelines. Don't leave your baby sleeping too long in a pram or a car seat, especially not unattended. But you can look up those guidelines through Red Nose. Yeah, but yeah, at the end of the day, absolutely do some naps on the go. It's a great idea.
Hmm, great. We only have time for, I think, maybe a couple more questions before we wind up and you don't lose your voice, Fallon. So, Charlotte asked this question. I think it's a great question. Regarding early risers, my baby wakes up at 5 a.m. and we've tried resettling and we're not starting the wake up ritual until 6:30 a.m. with varying degrees of success on that. But at what point do we just accept that he's an early riser, or do we persist with the resettling at that early hour?
Mm. I don't think you should accept it just yet. There's lots of things that we could think about first. So, this parent's doing a great job of not starting that kind of morning wake up routine until the desired wake up time. So, if your
Hmm.
baby does wake a long time before you want them to, just keeping it pretty dark, pretty boring, nothing too engaging or stimulating is just a really good way to show the circadian rhythm that this is not the right time to start the day. I think anything before 6 a.m. is particularly hard. So that's a really, really good idea. What you could do is have a look at the pattern of their sleep. It might be that we start to push all the naps and bedtime and eventually wake up time. We push them all 15 minutes later every 3 or so days. So we're just trying to push that whole pattern of sleep just a little bit further along and then a little bit further along again. And often that helps that wake up time to be that little bit later. So that's something to think about. The final thing is just that, especially this time of year, it's starting to get a bit cooler. A lot of babies will wake around 4 or 5 a.m. because that's the time when it's coldest overnight. The body temperature drops a bit. If it is getting a bit cold in your baby's nursery at that time, often it's a case of, could be for one of the earlier feeds in the night, you might put an extra layer on or adjust your thermostat. Often that makes quite a big difference. But yeah, look, if your nursery's sort of 18 to 20 degrees, usually they're pretty cozy and they're all right. But
Hmm.
yeah, something to think about. Also, a very noisy Australian bird life. Often they kick off very early. So if you've got noisy birds in your neighborhood, some white noise or something like that might also really help to get your baby through to that 6:30 a.m. wake up.
Well, of course, yeah, you could mask that noisy environment, being conscious of what might be causing a wake. Yes, we do have some pretty aggro birds in this country. Here's a great question because it gets to your point earlier on, Fallon, about information people come across. And every year or two, there's another uh, set of messages showing up for parents. I'm not sure if it's fact or fiction. So, this is a fact or fiction question. Claudia would like to know, is the 4-month sleep regression that obviously she's hearing about online or elsewhere, is that fact or fiction? And if it is fact, what's the best ways to get through it unscathed?
Love this. I wish we had another hour to talk about it. So, by and large, regressions, there's no evidence for regressions at set ages. But at 4 months, there definitely is a big shift in sleep. You can call it a regression if you want to. Yeah, we don't have scientific evidence for regressions, but we do see a lot from parents that at 4 months of age sleep can get very tricky. And it all ties into those preferences I was talking about earlier. They suddenly develop all these preferences for how and where they fall asleep. And that can mean suddenly they're waking up. So little babies might fall asleep in your arms, not care less if they wake in the night and they're not in your arms anymore. But at 4 months, 5 months, they really start to care about that. So if you want to get through that unscathed, and a lot of parents do, I would just start practicing some cot settling before that time. It doesn't have to be every single settle, but if your baby sometimes falls asleep in their cot with you there supporting them when they reach that 4 or 5 month mark, it might become their preference that actually I'm okay falling asleep in my cot. It's not such a big deal. I don't mind if I wake up here. So get a little bit of practice in before you hit that 4 month mark. That can be, yeah, just a good way to help navigate it. And if it doesn't go well, if the wheels still fall off,
Mm.
doesn't matter because sleep can turn around really quickly, and there's plenty of strategies out there to help support you with whatever it is you need to do with sleep and settling to have excellent sleep health, for you and for your children as well.
Wonderful, Fallon. I am going to pull the pin there. We have a number of great questions we didn't get to, so my apologies. Time is on top of us, but thank you so much, everybody who asked questions. And Laura, sorry we didn't get to the remainder of your questions. Do remember those sources you can go to for more advice, and you can also look back through our other webinars on this topic and get more raw material. But for now, I just want to quickly thank Fallon, of course, just moving to the end. Fallon, you've given us 2 hours of your time over the last few weeks to do these sessions. Thank you so much. I know it's valuable. We know it from the numbers and the feedback. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure.
And to everybody who took part tonight, thank you for your patience and your questions. And please do fill out the short feedback survey. And don't forget, the resources are there for you to explore. And we're constantly thinking about how else we can support parents online and in other ways. So keep in touch with sources that you think you can trust and that have those signs that Fallon mentioned earlier on. With that, we will bring our webinar to a close. And I'll finish off by reminding parents they can go to our website, Raising Children, but also there's the Raising Healthy Minds app, which is for 0 to 11-year-old children, a free app what you can use to explore how your child's going emotionally in emotional and social development. So it's an early support around mental well-being for children. Just a small plug for a free resource funded by the government. And speaking of the government, you do have those other sources that are government funded that you can go to. If any of this conversation has left you a bit um, tender, or you're actually feeling upset or concerned and you would need more support after this event. So please do jump and get that support. Thank you again, everybody, to the team online behind the wheels and Anne and Susan in the chat room. We wish you a very nice evening and a nice winter, and take care, and we'll all see you again soon. Take care and thank you.